Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Thomas Graham, Associate Professor of History here on the Dunwoody campus. And today is one of the special days we have here on this campus. We're here to celebrate the hard work and dedication of Victoria White, one of the best students I've ever seen on this campus, actually. About a year ago, she was a student in my honor section of World History. At the beginning of the term of that honor section, the students were asked to be divided into small groups. Then each student in the group was expected to establish a separate individual research project within the general topic for the group. And Tori's group, her nickname is Tori, chose the exciting thing, which I was shocked by. Three girls did this. They chose the topic, propaganda in 20th century totalitarian regimes. Anyway, within that, Tori opted to study the propaganda during the Chinese Cultural Revolution of the 1960s. To be honest, her paper was a pure delight. It was fun to read. However, Tori is not the kind of person who just merely meets expectations. She sets her goals much higher. While doing her research, she was able to obtain real pins, posters, and other artifacts from the real Cultural Revolution, which she presented during her oral presentations to her class. So without further ado, let's give a warm round of applause for this year's winner of the JPC Social Science Award.
Thank you very much, Dr. Graham. I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and I'm really, truly honored to be here. I had no idea that Mao Zedong's propaganda would generate so much interest, but I think probably most of you are here for the cookies, and that's fine. I must thank Denise Barber and Marianne Cullen. I'd love to take credit for the wonderful display out there, but I can't. I had nothing to do with it. While I was dealing with my classes this semester, they were working tirelessly to put that together, and I think it looks amazing out there. So thank you to them. I must also thank Laura Mirza because she has been such an inspiration and really pushed me to get this done. This has been a year in the making, and I've been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and she's really gotten me together on it, and so thank you very much. And of course, last but not least, I've got to thank Dr. Graham. I wrote this paper, as he said, for his honors world history class last year. And his interest in my work and also in my success was what really challenged me to do my very best. I've never had a teacher that spent so much time and invested so much in one student, and he did that with each one of us in that class. I mean, it was amazing how much personal interest he took in our success. So if any of you have not taken Dr. Graham's class, I highly recommend it. As Dr. Graham said, my name is Victoria White. I'm an English major. I've taken classes at both the Dunwoody and the Clarkston campuses at GPC. And I'm going to be speaking to you about a paper I wrote about propaganda in communist China under Mao Zedong. Dr. Graham kind of explained, how we chose these topics. We just wanted to do something interesting. Our group, we were supposed to choose a very, very broad topic. And we wanted to do something that maybe had never been done before, and that we could actually really get interested in. So we chose propaganda under communist dictators. And then I narrowed my topic down to Mao Zedong's use of propaganda in communist China. And I was immediately fascinated with the subject matter, but it was not an easy issue to research. Very little has been written about Mao Zedong's propaganda campaign, despite how widespread and important it was to his rule. However, with the help of Galileo, the library staff, Amazon.com, and eBay, I was able to find articles, books, and some actual propaganda materials that you can see behind me that helped me to complete my research. My paper focused on the history of propaganda in communist China, propaganda posters and art, Mao badges, opera, the Little Red Book, and political rituals. However, because of time constraints, today I will simply focus on the development of propaganda in China, propaganda posters, and Mao badges. In my paper, I argued that the effectiveness of Mao's propaganda campaign was not only due to its accessibility and the use of familiar Chinese traditions and experiences, but also the way in which much of the propaganda required the public's active participation. By the time of Mao Zedong's birth in 1893, China was seen as nothing more than a source of raw materials and labor for the Western countries that controlled her. China itself was divided by factional fighting and was still living under the ancient feudal system. In a country with the largest and possibly the most diverse population on earth, where hundreds of different dialects are spoken, Mao did what no person in modern history had been able to do. He unified China under one leader and one party. Mao Zedong became active in the Communist Party in 1921, and he quickly rose through the ranks. In 1949, he declared the founding of the People's Republic of China, and he ruled as chairman and leader until his death in 1976. Despite years of turmoil and tens of millions of deaths under his rule, Mao was deified during his lifetime, and his word went unquestioned by the millions of people who revered him. Mao and the Chinese Communist Party used widespread propaganda to lead, control, and indoctrinate the people of China. China has a long history of thought reform and persuasion. The ancient philosopher Confucius believed that persuasion and education were more effective means of achieving social conformity than the use of force or punishment. And Mao Zedong expanded this line of thought, promoting the use of models to educate the masses on appropriate behavior. Mao Zedong thought was partly based on the concept that the masses will emulate positive models and they will reject negative models. Therefore, through the use of models, it's possible to change an entire society's collective mindset. Models could be generalized characters depicted in art, or they could take the form of actual people or industries. And back here, I don't know if you can see this, but this is an actual picture of Mao meeting with model workers. And so not only did these model workers get the opportunity of meeting their chairman, but they had it commemorated in this artwork. So this was an incredible, a tremendous incentive for others to emulate these models' behavior. As early as 1949, the Communist Party was using simple propaganda reading materials to educate the Chinese people and to combat illiteracy. Political slogans were short and easily understood and memorized by the masses. They were popular because they drew from everyday life and experience. Before the party gained complete control over China and its means of mass communication in 1949, they utilized public communication, entertainment media, methods developed by the Soviet Union, such as propaganda plays and wall newspapers, and traditional communications forms such as New Year's prints. The New Year's print has a long and beloved history in China. This is an example of a traditional Chinese New Year's print, and then the one next to it is the communist version, where they kind of took the basic elements and twisted it to support their goals. So in this way, they were able to gain popularity with the masses and with the Chinese peasants. The prints are popular because of their use of bright colors, traditional Chinese symbolism, and distinct style. The simple lines and bright colors are used to depict slightly realistic images against blank white backgrounds. And peasants responded well to the images as long as the scenes portrayed were slightly more beautiful than everyday life. The traditional water printing methods of producing these prints were easily accessible to artists in communist-controlled areas, so they were able to produce them on a large scale. Once the Chinese Communist Party had taken control of China in 1949, the main function of propaganda art was the popularization of communism. The party needed propaganda art that could reach all social groups and classes to unite China under communist rule. Communist artistic leaders looked towards Soviet art for inspiration. Soviet socialist realism combined the realities of the present day with the future's possibilities to form artwork that was both positive and realistic. And I've got an example of that. This right here is Soviet socialist realism, and in the background on this building, you can't see it, but there's actually a portrait of Stalin on the building. Socialist realism was combined with popular Chinese art styles, including New Year's prints, to create art that would show everyday people living the perfect lives that could supposedly be achieved through communism. The pictures were enthusiastic and bright, reflecting society's optimism for the future under party rule. The most recognized images in Chinese propaganda artwork are probably those of the Cultural Revolution era. It was during this time that Mao's image took on a dominant role in art. Mao was portrayed as a father figure, a military leader, a teacher, and eventually as a son or as a god. As the obsession with Mao intensified, he was less often portrayed with the masses, leading and teaching, and more often depicted as the sun in the sky, shining and smiling benevolently for his people, or even causing crops to grow. And that's one with him as the sun. And then over here, he's actually causing the crops to grow and providing life-giving sunlight to the Chinese people. It's estimated that during the Cultural Revolution, approximately 2.2 billion portraits of Mao were produced. Mao's face was often painted with a reddish tint so as to appear to be creating light rather than reflecting it. A portrait of Mao was a necessary accent for every home, often taking the place of honor on the family altar. Because Mao posters were so readily available, some were even used as colorful wallpaper. Even today, Mao's portrait occupies a space of honor on Tiananmen Square, on the Gate of Heavenly Peace, immediately below Mao's position on the gate where he declared the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. And Mao badges, like the ones I'm wearing, were another exceptionally popular form of expressing solidarity with the Communist Revolution and with Mao Zedong. The very first Mao badges were created by university students in the 1930s. However, badge production would not reach its zenith until the years 1966 through 1969, during the very beginning of the Cultural Revolution. It's estimated that during those years, more than 3 billion badges of at least 50,000 different styles were produced. Badges produced during the Cultural Revolution were an important part of the propaganda campaign, which was initiated to expose Mao's image to all Chinese people and to transform him from Chairman Mao, the often misguided leader of the people, into a deified icon. Almost all badges had Mao's face in profile, often hovering above meaningful buildings, events, places, or items. One of the more recognizable qualities of many of the badges was the gratuitous use of the color red. Red symbolized not only communism, but also one's commitment to the communist cause. Many badges also incorporated short slogans or quotes. And if you have a chance, there are a lot of Mao badges out there in one of the display cases, so take a look at them. In the years leading up to the Cultural Revolution, badge production was mostly a centralized government effort. However, by 1966, the government had lifted all restrictions on badge production, and badges were then produced by individuals, Red Guard units, businesses, factories, schools, and craftsmen. According to one account, badge production during the early years of the Cultural Revolution was considered by the Power Supply Bureau to be more important than food production. When badge factories produced new designs, they often held street parades in which the employees of the factory would model the badges and march alongside drums and flags. By 1969, the excessive production of badges had become such a problem that the Chinese Communist Party ordered that all unnecessary badge production end. Not only was the prolific use of Mao badges undermining Mao's stance against overindulgence, but the country was actually running out of aluminum. The Red Guard's badge production had been halted 2 years earlier in 1967, but individuals had continued to produce badges. In 1969, Mao finally issued a statement. He said, "Give me back my airplanes," referring to the need to save the aluminum that was being used to produce badges for other more necessary items. Badge production had effectively ceased by the end of 1970, except for a very brief revival after Mao's death in 1976. Although badges were first popularized amongst Red Guards, they were eventually dispersed within the entire population. During the Cultural Revolution, the Chinese people universally wore Mao badges, either out of unquestioned loyalty to Chairman Mao or in order to escape persecution from overzealous Red Guards. The convenience and the availability of Mao badges made them the obvious choice for many Chinese looking for a way to show camaraderie with the revolution without necessarily doing anything. Soon the sight of Mao badges was so customary that radical revolutionaries had to distinguish themselves by wearing their badges in creative ways, sometimes even pinning them to their skin, or by obtaining rare or valuable badges. Badges became so popular that the masses themselves became instruments of Mao's propaganda campaign simply by wearing them. Regardless of whether or not the people displaying badges wholeheartedly supported Mao's campaigns, the fact that every person displayed at least one badge gave the illusion of a society in complete agreement, all endorsing Mao. Mao Zedong is a historical enigma, a reckless and dangerous leader willing to sacrifice the lives of millions of his own people to further his ideals, yet he was deified by the very people he subjugated. His use of propaganda was incredibly successful with the masses, not only because it relied on ideas and concepts that were familiar and comfortable to the Chinese people, but also because the people then took his propaganda and disseminated it amongst themselves. The people of China became the ultimate tool for spreading Mao's ideals and thoughts, because in doing so they created the appearance of complete and unified compliance, allowing Mao and the Chinese Communist Party to maintain complete control and to push their campaigns even farther without fear of widespread dissent. The Chinese people were trapped in the very system they were perpetuating, with no opportunity for escape. More than 30 years after his death, many Chinese remain loyal to their chairman, and many others are still reluctant to speak negatively about the years under his rule. This is the phenomenal power of Mao's propaganda campaign. And I hope you all enjoy the exhibit. I'm so glad you could be here, and thank you very much. It was a semester-long project. I mean, it started, basically everything that I bought was sent directly from China. So, you know, even shipping was a long, involved process. But basically, I started doing research for this project as soon as we got the assignment, because I knew that it was going to be very obscure and very difficult to find any information. So as soon as I started doing research, you know, eBay items kept popping up, and I was like, well, wouldn't that be neat? And so I started bidding on them, and I got some things for not very much money. Everybody's trying to get rid of them now in China. But yeah, it was a several-month process.
I'd love to make a comment about the paper, the quality of the paper. When she brought them to her final presentation, I've been studying Chinese history for years, but I never had touched a poster from the Cultural Revolution. Never actually touched one. Seen books and whatever, but never touched one. What impressed me was how thin that paper is. It's so fragile, it almost falls apart in your hand. It's incredibly cheap paper.
Right.
So for her to protect this stuff, it's going to have to be behind this stuff because it will fall apart almost in your hands. That's stuff.
Well, basically, I mean, our class knew that we were going to be doing some kind of very involved, very in-depth research project. And so several of us decided that propaganda would be an interesting topic. And once we narrowed our general research topic down to dictators' use of propaganda, you know, there are really three that are going to be interesting: Stalin, Mao, and Hitler. So each one of us picked one, and I've always been fascinated with Mao. I mean, he's essentially the #1 killer. He killed more people than Hitler or Stalin. And not many people know about that, you know. So I just thought it was fascinating. And Chinese culture has always been fascinating to me. So, but once I got involved in researching it, I got even more excited about it. Don't ask me. Well, I think misguided politics. You know, it wasn't necessarily mass killing campaigns. Much of it was starvation.
Kind of follow up on that one verse she's talking about. It's called 3 lean years between 1959 and 1962, which is an offshoot of the Great Leap Forward. And they're starving people the same sort of way that Stalin starved people in Ukraine in the 1930s. The current guesstimate number of dead is anything from 20 to 30 million people starved to death in 3 years.
The face never changed. Basically, you can't really see it, but there are lots of, you know, he's shown in profile. He's always shown looking left because leftist policies. If a badge producer, this is interesting, if a badge producer ever accidentally made a badge with him facing right, they face serious consequences. The same was true with artists. If he was slightly turned to the right, that was seen as very, very negative. But it's essentially the exact same portrait on every single badge. It's very, very standardized. The standardized badge portrait is actually, let me see. That's not it. It's kind of this one right here, but it's more profile. It's just a straight profile of his face, and it's very, very recognizable. I mean, you see it on badge after badge after badge. It's almost always the same. The big ones, yes. The big ones are original.
And keep in mind, those are 40 years old. I'm still trying to figure out how they lasted 40 years.
Does Stalin always face to the left?
I don't know about that. I don't know.
We're talking about badges. Badges, other artwork, you can see facing, you know,
Right.
facing
Right.
but the badges specifically are left.
Yes.
And those are on display, the whole group, but the Tori has collected are out in the library.
Yes, the badges were, and there were periods where restrictions were lightened, and then, less attention was paid to how Mao looked, especially during years of his unpopularity. Portraits and badges and everything were still produced, but nobody was really paying attention to how he was portrayed. So you are going to find pictures and portraits of him facing right or facing left, but under years where it was very restricted, especially during the Cultural Revolution, he was always facing left.
How violent the Cultural Revolution was. Literally, it was almost a near overturn of government in which the kids your age actually destroyed much of the bureaucracy of China. College students were just essentially instructed to go out and beat up people. If you watch the movie called The Last Emperor, which my film class is watching, you get the last scene of showing them beating up bureaucrats, putting guns against on them. There were thousands and thousands killed just harassed in the streets by students who have now become total fanatics and true believers, almost kamikaze level of fanaticism, and they turned this country, which is so large in population, into this sort of death camp of violence in the 1960s. It's a horrible story.
Yes.
How's your idea of Mao has changed after you done the research?
Well, I didn't know the extent of the violence before I started this. I knew that I knew it was a horrible, horrible time in Chinese history, but I did not know the extent of what went on. And I read, all these books, except for about 5, which are Dr. Graham's. These are just some of my sources, and I read all of them. So I learned dirty little secrets about Mao Zedong's sex life. But, I learned all these things that I didn't necessarily want to know. But it gave me a very, very thorough understanding, I think, of a portion of Chinese history that a lot of Westerners never learn about, and maybe a lot of modern Chinese people don't learn about or don't think about anymore.
It's not brought up. Any other?
I've got one.
Yeah.
As far as availability of books about Mao in China.
Mm-hmm.
what
It's
is the
difficult.
status?
Well, no, not Mao in China. That's actually a pretty popular subject for books. The propaganda under Mao in China is very, very rare. I mean, the books that I did get on that subject, I had to either order directly from the publisher, or I had to find them, in obscure little bookstores online where they only had one copy of them. So, but Mao is a pretty popular. I mean, it's a fascinating subject. There are a lot of biographies about him, and there are a lot of overviews. Several of these are really good. Jonathan Spence is a good author about modern China. This book, The Private Life of Chairman Mao, I don't know if anybody's heard about it, but it is by his personal doctor.
He was running notes, and then he was afraid that the Cultural Revolution would grab the notes and kill him, so he destroyed all his notes. And afterwards, once it was all over, then he went back and recreated this out of his memory. And it is frightening, to say the least. It is a frightening biography to read. Is that a fair assessment, May?
Yes, yes. Hey!
Any other questions? Yes, one right here.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Do you think some people might see him as a hero?
Actually, yeah. In China there are still some people who revere him. As with any person who, no matter what they do, there's always going to be somebody who's still following, who believes that maybe his heart was in the right place and it just didn't work, or it worked for them and it didn't necessarily work for other people. So yeah, his portrait still hangs on Tiananmen Square. That's a huge deal. So officially, the Chinese government doesn't really talk about Mao anymore, but officially their stance is that he was not wrong.
Is your dad here?
Yes.
Could you introduce him?
This is my dad, Jim White. Thanks for coming. And also, Denise came, which I'm very excited about. She did such a great job. Denise is responsible for, Denise and Marianne, right, are responsible for the exhibit, and I appreciate your hard work so much. I mean, it looks great. And you're on vacation, and you can't. I'm so glad you came. Yes?
You know how some people say that the Holocaust never happened? People say that what Auschwitz
I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know still the numbers of how many people actually died are they vary greatly. I mean, you know, by millions and millions and millions. Nobody really knows how many people died. I'm sure there are some people, nobody denies that everybody knows.
Nobody talks about it.
They'll sell you badges and posters, but they don't want to talk about Mao.
Little red books, they'll sell you by the ton, by the carload. Nobody wants them. Yeah. If not, how about a round of applause?